My grandmother is a constellation. In my dreams, she visits me all the time, tells me I'm still her number one, asks me about her beloved daughter as we sit inside her Franklin Avenue apartment on the seventh floor, as we sit inside my childhood apartment on Minnehaha, number 201, until I drop back into my body, 2024 years away from patient zero, 34 years as a congregation of every echo. Here are my hands, here is my skin, these are my eyes, the sunlight finds through half-turned dusty blinds.
Thanks for listening to Read Minnesota Books. I'm your host, Deborah Copperrood. Today, I'm happy to speak with Anthony Ceballos, author of the poetry collection Glassful of Prayer. He is a first-generation descendant of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and he lives in Minneapolis. He's an alumni of the Loft Literary Center's Mentor Series, the Hamline University BFA program, and the Randolph University MFA program. His work has been published in Yellow Medicine Review, Waterstone Review, Queer Voices, and the anthology Another Last Call, Poems on Addiction and Deliverance. He's been a fellow in 2 Indigenous Nations Poets Retreats, and get this, he works at Birchbark Books, Louise Erdrich's bookstore. Anthony, welcome to Read Minnesota Books.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. What is your connection to Minnesota?
Oh, well, I was born and raised in Minnesota, Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, really. I think I was born at HCMC, but then I went to South Minneapolis, and there I've been ever since. So, yeah, born and raised, and whenever I think of the word home, if I were, in my dictionary, if I were to look up the word home, it would just say South Minneapolis.
Yeah, nice. Tell me about your poetry collection, Glassful of Prayer.
Yeah, well, it is my first collection published by Trio House Press. And it is a collection that it spans many, many years. I think the oldest piece in the book is well over 10 years old, starting probably around the time I began my writing education at Hamline University. Many of the pieces are more recent than that, but the oldest ones go back that far, so it does represent that journey. It is about many things. It is about, sometimes I like to joke that the last thing that's about is me, because really it's a collection of many different stories. It's about my mother, my father, my grandmother. It definitely deals with navigating addiction, navigating generational trauma. So it's about many different things. It's hard to kind of sum it up in any kind of quick or kind of few sentences way, because it's just about so much.
Yeah, no, you're doing a great job. How would you describe your poetry style?
Well, I think when I write a poem, there are two things at play. There are more than just two, but the things that always are there no matter what, very, very noticeably as I'm writing, my love of just language. I always tell people I love a beautiful sentence, and sometimes that is just sometimes the base of just my writing anything. I just want to write down really pretty sentences. It's a little self-indulgent. And then also the sound of a poem. I really think about how every syllable, every breath sounds when I'm reading something. I take my time reading a piece. So I kind of rehearsing it, if you will, if I'm going to do a reading of many pieces in front of an audience or many people. So that too is at play. And as I'm writing something, there has to be balance.
Hmm.
So I can just indulge in, especially if I'm just writing down something because I need to write something down and I don't see any future for it, it's whatever. But if it feels like, okay, this could potentially land somewhere, then there has to be a balance between my love of really just lovely language and the sound of a piece and how those mix and what larger purpose are they serving? Is there a harmony in it? So that's kind of how, and I mean, I'm not, I don't have a checklist of like, I'm thinking, I must think of all these things as but it's just like any artistic piece really is kind of beginning its journey into the world, and whatever it is that is deciding, will it go far, will it kind of stay close, all of those things just kind of are elements that are moving around in its creation, and that's kind of how it begins. I suppose very physically it begins just my opening my notebook, looking at the that at times oft cliched blank page and making sure I've got at least a couple of good pens, and just sitting.
Perfect. So a few years ago, I attended an author talk between Tommy Orange and Anton Troyer about Tommy Orange's book, There. One of the topics they covered was the urban Native American experience, and they talked about how that kind of experience is in contrast with literature written about reservation life. And I thought a lot about their conversation when I read your poem 612, which is a masterpiece,
Oh, thank you.
inspired by, well, you've got the little tagline that it's inspired by Ginsberg's Howl. And as you mentioned that you're from South Minneapolis, and it's kind of like this ode to the city too. Can you tell me about writing that poem?
Yeah, it started with a bit of a challenge to myself. I was like, I want to write something really, really long. I was just like, I don't know what it was. It was just like, I, I know I can do it. I just have to do it. And so I wrote it, I think, over 3 days. And I would write a section and then I would be like, okay, now I'm just gonna stop and I'm not gonna overthink it because sometimes overthinking can be the end of a piece, and then it's like, where to go. And then the next day I would go back to it and I would do it at like different coffee shops because that's one part of it. That's something I love is going to a coffee shop and sitting down with a nice cup of coffee and then letting the writing thing happen. Anyway, so I would, return to it and I would just kind of, rather than really like, really intense thinking, I gotta, go back from this element and this element. I was just like, all right, just read over what you wrote and then let the pen do whatever it does. And so that happened over 3 days. And, I also have found that like nothing, I don't necessarily sit down with the idea of anything that I'm gonna write, all these political things, and make these political statements, it doesn't work. Anytime I have tried to do that, it's just become kind of like, it's not that great. So with this one though, I didn't do that, but I remember it was, I think about the time Lake Street was still under just, renovation or whatever the hell they were calling it. And I just remember seeing just the life of Lake Street struggling so much. And I just felt so depressed about it. And I just remember walking and images that I were sticking out for me walking through Minneapolis. So much of the, you know, yeah, people struggling. I
Hmm.
take public transportation, like I see it plenty, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And I certainly don't think that writing something's gonna fix it, but I knew in that moment, I'm just like, well, it was kind of just, I just had to like write something down, it's just like how you have to stretch or get something out. I just had to, and and so that was the content. I also wanted it to be its own. I don't know. It's because it's heavy. It's very, very heavy. But I also know that it's coming from this place of tremendous love I have for Minneapolis, for the Twin Cities, and understanding that the pain that exists and that I'm seeing, you know, that kind of difficulty, that is no one's fault, and no one should have to suffer through that. No one should have to deal with that. And then I know where it comes from, and I don't know, it's very hard to describe that emotional state that I felt when I was writing that. It was sadness, it was a deep love. I mentioned the bench, and I'm thinking of Third Avenue and Franklin, all those bus stops there, how much life I've seen happen there,
Hmm.
how much I feel that intersection in my marrow. I don't can't describe it. I spent so much time like waiting for the bus there, and yeah, it's hard to describe the emotional space, but it's just like this flood of a lot of things that found its way onto the onto that page and those pages, if you will. And then I was just thinking about I remember thinking about Allen Ginsberg. And they always talk about like who are your literary ancestors? And I have been thinking a lot about him at the time. And I remember how it felt like just walking through and seeing reality. It was seeing reality, and I was like, I want to write something that is long and feels like it's actually seeing reality, like that it didn't shy away from it for myself as what I was kind of, like that it was just what it was, but it wasn't like trying too hard or, trying to be that thing, and that it just was that, anyone reading it or hearing it, they too are with me walking down the street and they are seeing what I'm seeing, and hopefully I'm conveying it in a way that says, you know, this is the humanity of Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. And, if it's someone who doesn't know about the city, all of that, oh, the city's just so scary, it's like, oh no, let's like walk with me, walk through this piece of writing and understand that there's so much more to it than whenever it is that media is pushing in your face that this city is beautiful, that this city is beloved, like a family member. This city feels pain. Maybe you don't always know this relationship with your family member, but you know that their pain is coming from a place and that it's more than likely not their fault. And you wouldn't say, oh, it's your fault. The city feels pain as well, and it is hurting. And at the time I wrote that, it was hurting. It has been hurting for a very long time. And it's just like, I don't know, I guess some part of me, again, it wasn't like I had a plan of like, oh, this is what needs to happen with this poem. This is what I'm going to do. It was just kind of, like, but almost wanting people to, understand that the city, that Minneapolis, that the Twin Cities is very much, it's a living being. The city is a living city, and the city feels every emotion, feels every pain, wants to heal, wants to understand, wants to learn and grow. I'm just hoping that somebody who reads that piece might see that and kind of tell themselves, oh, maybe what media is telling me about the city is wrong, and maybe I need to figure it out for myself.
Yeah, I am going to read it again and I'm going to imagine myself on a walk with you on Franklin or
Yeah,
Lake.
yeah.
Yeah. Or writing the 21.
Yeah,
That,
which, I will forever call it the 21. I think they changed the name to the Beeline or something. I'm like, it's the 21 for me forever.
yeah, for sure. You were a Loft Literary Center Mentor Series Fellow. I have to tell you, I applied for that so many times. I was a finalist one year, but I never got in. So I recognize what an honor it is. How did that program help you grow as an artist?
Oh my. Well, one of the blurbs on the book and one of the people of many who were pivotal in the book's creation, Sun Yun Shin, she was my mentor during that time. We had local mentors, and then we had mentors that would come in kind of, national. She was the local mentor, and oh, I am so grateful for the connection that I have with her because I just, yeah, the book wouldn't be what it is. She looked at one of the very first iterations of it before it was anywhere where it is now. And she gave me such wonderful feedback. And this was after the Mentor series. I think of a dear, dear poet friend of mine, Siobhan Williams Shen, an amazing, amazing poet who I met in that program. And I think about that friendship and how that wouldn't exist. I think about everyone I met in that program and that sense of community. I was happening at a time where I had a lot of personal things going on that I think were it not for that program, I would not have had anything to cling to as far as the writing life goes. So I owe that program a lot, and I just am so grateful for it because of the time it came into my life when I needed that grounding for those relationships that have continued. Um, yeah, it was a very, very pivotal moment where things, a fork in the road was present and it kind of pushed me to one side of the fork, if you will, which I was grateful for.
Great. What do you like better, writing a first draft or revising what you've already written?
I don't know. I I think it just depends on kind. Of the moment, I mean, sometimes I am, thrilled to see what it makes itself apparent that and new on the page, a first draft. I will say I try not to think about things in terms of drafts, which could sound kind of highfalutin, but it's more just like I write something, and if I haven't written in a while, I'm excited about it. And then either it will call me back in some way, and I'll, look it over. I'll speak it out loud, and I'll listen to how it sounds, and then that could be like, the next part of the draft, and or I'll type it, and that'll be like the next part of the draft, or I'll just never look at it again, I'll be like, that's that, So just kind of like how much a piece calls itself to me and how much I feel that connection with it that kind of will then tell me whether or not I will, have multiple drafts or I will be working on this one for a while or I'll move on to the next thing.
Who is your favorite Minnesota writer?
Ooh, I can't. I don't know. There are too many good writers. I would feel, if I picked one, I'd have to name all of them. It sounds like a cop-out answer, but I think of we are so lucky in Minnesota in the Twin Cities to have the community of writers that we have, and in the acknowledgments of my book, I think, and every person even if I haven't had much of an interaction with them because somehow, some way, if they showed up to a reading I did, if they, said, hey, that was good, if they gave me a smile on a bad day, I don't know. Like, I just think that community here is wonderful. And I am so grateful to be a part of that and to also have been nurtured through all these years by that writing community and the support that we have here for writing and for the arts in a more general sense is unlike many places in the country, and to be a part of that beautiful network and that beautiful weaving of artistic spirit, of writerly spirit, is wonderful. So I couldn't pick, you know one writer. It wouldn't feel, I couldn't.
Fair, fair. That's fine. Are you on social media? Where can folks follow you online and find out about upcoming readings?
Yeah, well, I am on social media. I am on Instagram. My handle is a bit silly. It's that casual gay vampire, which has worked out in the long run. I'm glad I picked that. You can also find me on Facebook. I've been working on a website for a very long time, and I always think it's just about ready. It's just about ready, because I do like doing that kind of stuff. Then I kind of fall into the whole perfectionist thing, and it's always just about ready. So at some point there will be a website, anthonyceballos.com. So and at some point someone will check that years from now and be like, hey, it works.
Well, I will link to those in the show notes. And I want to thank you so much for talking with me about Glassful of Prayer and your writing process. This was a real treat. Thank you,
Oh,
Anthony.
thank you. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
In the acknowledgments to Glassful of Prayer, Anthony thanks Lynette Rainey Grandel and Venus DeMars. You can read about their story in Rainey Grandel's memoir, Wild Things, a trans glam punk rock love story, published by Minnesota Historical Society Press in 2023. I read it when it came out and I loved it. That's it for this episode of Read Minnesota Books. You can subscribe on Substack or listen on any podcast app. I would love it if you would share the podcast with a friend or take a moment to give it a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.